So if you come to me 10 years ago and said, hey, Shannon, you're going to have a YouTube channel. You're going to talk about hockey. I would answer with, what? And certainly at any time where I talk to people about starting a YouTube channel, I was usually told, nah, don't do that. And then here we are. Now, if you'd also told 10 years ago, Shannon, hey, you're going to talk about that Boston-Philadelphia series, I would have answered with some colorful metaphors, probably some four-letter words, and I wouldn't have been very happy with you for even suggesting it. This was easily one of the low points for me as a Bruins fan, and yet it's a great series. It's a great story, and if I didn't report on this one today, that would be a mistake. Now, going into this series, Boston 39-10-13. Their overall record wasn't fantastic. And the Boston Bruins had home ice. They were the number 6 overall seed against the number 7 Philadelphia Flyers. Boy, did I feel good starting this series. I was like, wow, Boston's number 6 seed and they've got home ice in round 2 because seeds 6, 7, and 8 all won in round 1. The Flyers 41-35-6. They had more wins, but those overtime loss points gave Boston a better seeding. Boston had 206 goals scored in the regular season. They were 29th overall in that regard. 200 goals against, which was second. Philadelphia, 236 goals for, which was 10th. 225 goals against, which was 14th. Boston had beaten Buffalo in 6 to get to this. The Flyers had beaten New Jersey in 5. They then went on and beat Montreal in 5. And they lost to Chicago in the finals in 6. This was the playoffs that made people think, maybe you don't need to have a goaltender. That was the storyline coming out of these playoffs, and it led me to think people really are this crazy to think you don't need it. But on one end, you had Niemi and Chicago, and on the other, you had Philadelphia going through whoever. As goaltenders was basically how it was being approached, and they weren't paying a lot of money to these goalies. So the narrative coming out of 2010 was maybe goaltenders are overpaid and you don't need a big-name goaltender. Maybe a big-name goaltender is really overrated. And when I heard that narrative being spouted a lot, if I'd had a channel at the time, I would have told you why that's hogwash. And what we were seeing was the exception rather than the rule. But this was definitely a series as well that for me as a Boston fan left me having some questions about Tuukka Rask. I had some questions about Tuukka Rask coming out of this season. Tim Thomas deciding, I don't need to be there. And then in 2011, Thomas was the goaltender. And of course, we know what happened then. Now, to start Game 1, things look pretty good for Boston. Bégin scores from Bergeron and Recchi at 2:39. Bergeron would then score from Wideman at 12:54. So the last series that I did with Boston, of course, Bergeron was out. Second period, Perrant scores from Richards and Asham at 7:38 to make it 2-1. And then Shaitan scored from Boychuk and Wideman at 11:43 on the power play. And of course, Shaitan wearing a Bruins jersey, there are people who would look at the back of that jersey and go, it seems about right. Accurate. Power play goal, Pronger scores from Timonen and Richards at 15:48 as the defense was kind of shaky on the Boston end. Third period, Krejci scores from Shaitan and Lucic at 7:25. And again, Shaitan and Lucic on the same line. There are people who would look at that and go, it's accurate. Then there's a comeback by Philadelphia a little bit too late. Power play goal by Richards from Briere and Hartnell at 12:37. And then Briere scores from Carl and Pronger at 16:38 to make it 5-4. Boucher saves 41 out of 46. Rask saves 32 out of 36. And again, as a Bruins fan, I'm looking at that game going, well, at least they escaped with the victory there. Game 2, still in Boston. Boychuk scores from Bergeron at 5:12. Johnny Boychuk, one of my favorite defensemen. And it was a result of this playoffs in part that he became one of my favorite defensemen. Richard scores from Briere and Leno at 17:06. Ville Leno became quite the story for the Flyers that year too. Second period, Shaitan scores from Wheeler and Wideman at 9:31. It is during these playoffs that my yelling about Wideman becomes really loud. Now, where it's interesting is Wideman's numbers are good in this series. It's just I, as a fan watching the games, got mad at Wideman regularly. Briere would tie it again for Philadelphia from Leno and Pronger at 19:35, but in the third period, as time is winding down, Lucic scores from Krejci and Shaitan at 17:03. Boucher, 24 saves on 27 shots in the loss. Tuukka Rask, 24 saves on 26 shots. His overall numbers through games 1 and 2, pretty good. Game 3, Boston really asserts themselves in Philadelphia. Aaron Asham scores early from Giroux and Betts at 2:32. And then Wheeler scores to tie it from Hunwick and Savard at 4:11. Shaitan scores from Lucic and Krejci at 5:45. Second period, no scoring. So they enter the third with a 2-1 lead. They add to it. On the power play, it's Recchi from Wheeler and Chara at 2 minutes and 30 seconds, and an empty netter by Bergeron at 18:08. Rask saves 34 out of 35. Boucher saves 16 out of 19. And there you go. With the empty netter making it 4-1, the Bruins are up 3-0. There's no reason to think, well, they're going to trade Blake Wheeler. They're going to have to change out that defense. They're going to have to get rid of some guys here. They're going to have to shake things up. The Bruins aren't built to win. No, this is a team that at this stage after Game 3 looked like they could go pretty far. And keep in mind, there's not a top seed left. So I, as a Bruins fan coming out of Game 3, was like, you know what? I like it. But Game 4 scared the hell out of me. So, Game 4, Recchi scores from Bergeron and Payet at 15:37. 1-0 Boston. Then Briere scored from Giroux and Carl at 19:06 to tie it. Second period. Pronger scores from Carl and Carcillo at 4:28. And then Giroux scores from Hartnell and Carl at 8:35. Yeah, Matthew Carl on the board a lot. Ryder then scores from Hunwick and Wheeler at 10:56. But it's 3-2 Philadelphia after 2. Third period. Tying goal by Lucic from Wideman and Savard at 3:49. Leno then scored from Pronger and Briere at 14:20. Recchi scored from Bergeron and Wideman to tie it at 19:28 of the third period. We go to overtime. In overtime, it's Gagne from Carl and Richards at 14:40. Tuukka Rask saves 29 out of 34 in the loss. Boucher saves 33 out of 37. If I'd had a channel back then, I could verify this, and I don't. I don't have any verification of this. But at work after Game 4, I said, Boston's going to blow this. I had people saying, they're not going to blow it. They're up 3-1 and they're going home. What are you talking about? And what bothered me was how sloppy they were in this game. And I didn't like how sloppy some of these goals were. And the fact that when they had a chance to end it on the road, they didn't. And so we go to Game 5 in Boston. Leno scores from Pronger and Carl at 6:41. Second period. Hartnell scores from Briere and Tiemann at 11:16. Then it's a power play goal at Simon Gagne from Richards and Leno at 17:53. That's 3-0. And then in the third, Gagne scores at 6:48 for his second of the game. And it's a shutout. But here's where it's a real kick in the nads, if you're a Bruins fan. Boucher gets hurt after making 9 saves. Michael Leighton goes in. Leighton saves 14 out of 14 for the shared shutout. Rask saves 27 out of 31. Now, I love a good journeyman story as much as anybody else. I do. I've got a journeyman playlist on this channel where I talk about journeyman defensemen and journeyman forwards. And Leighton, journeyman goaltender. Played a long time. And I have great respect for Michael Leighton. There was nothing that ever frustrated me more as a Bruins fan than watching Leighton go in as an injury replacement, and the Bruins couldn't solve him. It was the most frustrating thing I ever watched. Again, if I'd had a channel and there'd been a live stream, that would have been a popular live stream. Here's where Shannon breaks, right here. Right about the third goal is where I'm throwing stuff. They're up 3-2. And again, I'm telling people, the Bruins are going to blow this. And even Montreal fans that I know are telling me, listen, teams don't come back from 3-0 down. It doesn't happen. They got 2 more chances to win this. Game 6. In Philadelphia. Richard scores from Gagne and Carcillo at 6:58. I start swearing early in this game. Second period, power play goal. It's Briere from Richards and Giroux at 16:20. And the whole way through, Boston's making Leighton look like Patrick Waugh. Again, no offense to Michael Leighton, but it's not supposed to go this way, where you're into a journeyman goaltender and you're making him look fantastic. That's what happens here. Lucic scores in the third from Wideman and Chara, but that's at the 19-minute mark. All it does is ruin the shutout. So Boston ruins the shutout, makes it 2-1. Rask saves 25 out of 27. Leighton saves 30 out of 31. This is an apoplectic Boston fan who has to work during Game 7, which was a early game. So because it's a matinee game, I don't have to watch it. And Game 7, I'm at work. And I was like, I'm glad I'm at work. Because people were like, aren't you mad you're working? We're working and you're missing Game 7. And I'm like, nah, I'm good. Because we worked on Saturdays. So I was good with that. I was fine with that. I made my peace with that. And the reaction was, but Boston's not going to lose it. They're going to win it. They're at home. And I said, they'll lose it. So, power play goal by Ryder from Recchi and Char at 5:27. Power play goal then by Lucic from Wideman and Boychuk at 9:02. And then Lucic scores the second of the game at 14 minutes and 10 seconds. A Leafs fan I worked with comes down to track me down. I'm working on a job, and he goes, hey, you're a Bruins fan, right? And I'm like, yeah. So Boston's up 3-0 in Game 7. And I said, well, what period's it in? And he said first. And I said, well, they could still blow it. But it would be nice not to lose by a reverse sweep. That's kind of humiliating. Yeah, it looks like they dodged a bullet. While he's talking to me, I imagine James Van Riemsdyk scored from Giroux at 17-12 to make it 3-1. Second period, I'm not keeping track of this score either. It's not like I had a cell phone on me at work in 2010. It's not like I was checking scores in between periods during breaks. Hartnell scores from Leno and Briere at 2:49, and then Philadelphia ties it. Briere from Hartnell at 8:39. Third period, Game 7 in Boston. And in the third period in Game 7, it's a power play goal. It's Simon Gagne. Richards and Leno with the assists at 12:52. That same person that came down to tell me, hey, it's 3-0 Boston, came down a couple hours later and said, never mind, they choked it. They lost 4-3. All I did at that point was basically shrug and say appropriate. They had a 3-0 series lead. Then they allowed 4 games to slip through their fingers. They had a 3-0 lead in the 7th game. Allowed 4 straight goals to let it slip through their fingers. Leighton saves 22 out of 25. Allows 3 goals in the first 14 minutes. Nothing the rest of the way. Tuukka Rask saves 23 out of 27. And he would lose the starting job to Tim Thomas the following year. This series, I realized the following year where Philadelphia and Boston played again. It was a different outcome the next year. This was a series that needed to happen. Where the Boston Bruins had been kind of meandering and they've been close. And this was a series that really showed how something had to change, something had to give. And for the players who were still there in 2011 after this, that was humiliating. And I always felt like they had a chip on their shoulder in 2011 as a result of what happened in 2010. Part of the reason I've made peace with what happened in 2010. Because 2011, they atoned for it. Wideman had 8 assists in that series. I had issues with Wideman. Lucic, 5 goals, 2 assists. He was in beast mode for large portions of that series. He was their best offensive force. Bergeron, 2 goals, 4 assists. Recchi, 3 goals, 2 assists. And Shaitan had 3 goals and 2 assists in this series. Shaitan had a memorable short run as a Bruin. Briere, 5 goals, 5 assists for the Flyers to lead the way for them. Richards, 3 goals, 6 assists. Ville Leno, as I said. Leno became a story coming out of this. 2 goals, 5 assists. Pronger, 2 goals and 4 assists for the Flyers, and Carl had 6 assists. Tuukka Rask was 3-4 with an .898 save percentage. Boucher 2-3 with an .891 save percentage. Leighton was 2-0 with a .943 save percentage. .943 save percentage by Michael Leighton in that series. And again, Philadelphia would continue this storyline through Montreal in the next round and then into Chicago, and they would sort of have this theme going for them into the following season that, hey, maybe you don't need a top-notch, top-flight goaltender. Just have 2 good goaltenders, maybe 3 in your organization, good goaltenders that you're paying not a whole lot of money. Maybe you don't need that big money goaltender. And then the following season, Tim Thomas made the argument that maybe having a big money goaltender is important. And of course, he'd face Luongo in the finals the following year. Another big money goaltender at the time. So there you go. The second round matchup between the Boston Bruins and the Philadelphia Flyers, where, again, if Boston had won this one in 4, who knows? Maybe Boston doesn't make the appropriate changes. Maybe they lose to Montreal in the following round, and they don't make the changes they needed to win a Stanley Cup in 2011. I am convinced, as a fan of the Bruins, that this was the series that led to them winning the Stanley Cup a year later. This was the series that made him angry enough and forced Chiarelli to make the appropriate changes to put the team over the top 12 months later. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Again, stay home where you can. Stay as safe as possible. Keep your hands nice and clean. There are things that are reopening now, so the whole stay home when you can, I'm going to be pushing that aside very soon. But hey, thank you guys so much for all your support throughout. It means a lot. And I'll talk to you again soon.